the music theory lady. Hi, welcome back to the Music Theory Lady. Today we're talking about note and rest durations. So we're talking about how long a note lasts or a rest lasts, and we're going to be talking about it in terms of number of beats. That takes us to the whole note or whole rest. That's 4 beats. Again, here's what the note looks like. Notice it's just a circle on its own. And then the rest has a black box that's hanging off of a line. So it's hanging down below. It's important for the next thing. The next one is the half rest or half note. That is 2 beats. Here's what the half note looks like. Here's what the half rest looks like. Notice this time that black box is sitting on top of that line of staff. So a whole rest, I'll go back, hangs down below the staff. A half rest is on top of the staff. And there's a couple ways you can remember that. One is I have students who say half rest sounds like hat. So it kind of looks like a top hat, whereas a whole rest kind of looks like a hole in the ground or a hole in the staff. Another way you can look at it is sort of an old-fashioned way of doing things, but if you were a lady and you passed a gentleman on the street, he was a whole gentleman if he took his hat off, and so this is his hat off, and he was not a gentleman or a half gentleman if he left his hat on. So that was what my piano teacher taught me when I was a kid, and it just really stuck. But make sure you know the difference between what a half rest and a whole rest looks like on the staff. That brings us to the anatomy of a note. You need to know what the parts of the note are called. This section down here is called the note head, and this section is called the stem. So if we go back to whole, notice it's just a note head. But when we go to the half note or half rest, technically half note, you have the note head and excuse me, and the stem as well. That brings us to the quarter note. The quarter note is 1 beat. It's the one we're probably going to see the most often. It looks like this. It's a filled in note head with a stem. And then the rest has this really funky stylized thing. You're welcome to do that. In my class, we typically just draw like a Z, C. So just kind of a really simplified version of it. It doesn't have to be quite so shaded in and have thicker parts and thinner parts. Just a ZC is good. An eighth note or eighth rest lasts for half of a beat. And this is what it looks like. You can see it either singular like this or in pairs like this. Sometimes they're kind of joined together, but that's still 2 separate eighth notes, 1 and 2. And then this is what the eighth rest looks like. And I added a special note here because the rest can't be paired like the note. We can't just add 2 eighth rests together. Instead, you're going to add them together to make a longer rest duration. So for instance, if I had 2 eighth rests, they would become a quarter rest in length. So only the notes can be paired together. And that brings us back to the anatomy of a note. So we've talked about the note head, we've talked about the stem. Today we're talking about, or now we're going to be talking about the flag. This extra little bit here is called the flag, but when they are paired together, it's actually called a beam. Other things that affect the length of sound would be a tie. We sort of talked about this a little bit the other day in basics of notation when it came to accidentals. But just to review, a tie is a curved line. So right here, this curved line is that tie, and it connects 2 or more of the same pitch into a single sound. So it's really important that you know a tie connects 2 of the same pitch. And again, the purpose of it is so that you start the sound and it holds all the way through that next note as opposed to restating that sound. So if I had a quarter note tied to a quarter note, like you see here in the example, instead of it sounding like da, da of 2 quarter notes, it's going to sound like da, and it's going to hold all the way through both of those beats. But there's another symbol in music that you have to know called a slur, and they look an awful lot like ties because it's also a curved line that's connecting the notes. The big thing here that's the difference is the tie, remember, connects 2 of the same pitch, 2 or more of the same pitch, and a slur connects 2 or more of different pitches. They don't all have to be different. Sometimes you'll have repeated pitches in there, but basically a slur's purpose is to connect the line and make it really nice and smooth. So instead of da, 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 you would have da. So it's just connecting that. As an instrument player, usually you are tonguing those notes in between to try and separate them. So it would be do, 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 do. If you're not tonguing, if it's a slur, it's going to be do, smooth, so it's just a consistent stream of air without separating it into separate notes. So here's an example of ties and slurs in the same passage. As you notice right here, this curved line is connecting two pitches that are exactly the same, whereas these curved lines down here are connecting notes that are different, and it's really just an instruction to make it smoother. And then here's another tie down here connecting that note to that note, which is making it a longer pitch. All right, that takes us to a dot. The dot is not like notes in that it's always 2 beats, or we know it as 1 beat, or we know it as 4 beats. A dot is actually an equation, and that equation is it lengthens the note or rest duration by half of the value of the note or rest that it's next to. So for instance, this note here, if we took off the dot, it would just be a half note. That's 2 beats. If we take half of 2, that's 1, and now we add it back to 2, and that makes for 3 beats in total. And you can see you can do it with rests as well. You can add a dot to any note or any rest. In this case, it's a half rest that has a dot next to it. And so that half rest again is 2 beats. Divided by 2 is 1, and so you add that 1 back to the 2, and it makes that rest 3 full beats. You need to also know that these notes now take on a different name. So instead of it just being a half note and a half note with a dot, it's called a dotted half note or a dotted half rest, dotted quarter note, dotted eighth rest, so on and so forth. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about meter signatures. A lot of people call them time signatures, but that term has sort of evolved over the last few years, and we now refer to it as meter signatures. Our most common meter signature we're going to have is 4/4. 4/4 looks like this on the staff. The top 4 is the number of beats that you're going to have per measure. The bottom 4 means that the quarter note is going to get 1 beat. So that means that I'm going to have a measure of 4 beats, and each time I snap the beat, it's the quarter note that's going by. So a really simple depiction of a measure of that would be 4 quarter notes. You could also do 2 half notes, or you could do 1 whole note to show all 4 beats. As we get into those dotted notes more, you could probably see a dotted half note and a quarter note. Whatever equals 4 beats, that would be able to go in a 4/4 measure. But then we also have meters like 3/4 and 2/4. Again, that top number means how many beats you get per measure. So if it's 3/4, it's 3 quarter notes per measure. If it's 2/4, it's 2 quarter notes per measure. And that's it today for note and rest durations. Bye!